Tom stood at his post in the grand crystal chamber of the Zephrosian royal palace. The walls gleamed like diamonds, catching the light from 3 suns that shone through the massive transparent dome above. He had been a royal guard here for 2 years now, one of only 12 humans employed by Queen Vala's court. His job was simple: watch, protect, and use those special human instincts that the aliens valued so much. The Zephrosians were an impressive species. They stood nearly 8 feet tall on their 6 legs, with hard shell-like skin that shimmered green and blue in the sunlight. Their large compound eyes missed nothing, and their minds worked like the most advanced computers Tom had ever seen. They could calculate complex math in seconds and solve problems that would take human scientists weeks to figure out. But they had hired humans for one reason. Humans could sense danger in ways that pure logic could not explain. They called it intuition. The Zephrosians respected this ability, even though they did not fully understand it. Today was special. The Peace Summit of 4 Worlds was taking place in the Great Chamber. Representatives from 3 neighboring star systems had traveled here to sign new trade agreements with Queen Vala's empire. Tom watched the gathering crowd of aliens, each species different from the others. The Aquarians looked like walking fish with silver scales and large black eyes. They breathed through special masks that kept their gills moist. The Terrans were small and furry, almost like earth cats, but walking on 2 legs and wearing elegant robes. The most interesting group was from Titan 7, a mining world. They were tall and thin with gray skin and long arms that seemed perfect for working in tight spaces. Queen Vala entered the chamber with her usual grace. She was magnificent, even by Zephrosian standards. Her shell was darker than most, with gold markings that showed her royal blood. The crown on her head was made from rare crystals found only in the deepest mines of Zephyros. When she moved, it was like watching a living work of art. "Welcome, friends from distant stars," Queen Vala announced. Her voice carried clearly through the chamber's perfect acoustics. "Today we write a new chapter in the history of peaceful cooperation between our worlds." Tom smiled slightly. He had heard the Queen practice this speech several times. She believed in being prepared for every important moment. The alien delegates took their positions around the circular discussion table that dominated the center of the room. As the ceremony began, Tom's eyes moved constantly around the room. He checked the positions of the other guards, both human and Zephrosian. He watched the delegates for any signs of trouble. He observed the servants as they prepared refreshments suited to each species' dietary needs. The Queen began presenting the trade proposals. Her voice was strong and confident as she explained the benefits each world would gain from the new agreements. The Aquarians would provide rare deep-sea minerals. The Terrans offered their advanced textile technologies. The Titan 7 delegation promised increased output from their massive mining operations. Tom noticed Ambassador Crix from Titan 7 seemed nervous. The tall, thin alien kept shifting in his seat and his gray skin appeared even paler than usual. His large dark eyes kept moving toward Queen Vala and then quickly looking away. Tom filed this observation away in his mind but did not yet consider it dangerous. The Queen continued her presentation, moving gracefully around the table as she spoke. "These agreements will strengthen all our worlds for generations to come. Our children will inherit a galaxy where cooperation replaces conflict." It was at that exact moment that Ambassador Crix stood up from his seat. He seemed to want to say something but stopped himself. Queen Vala turned toward him, and for a brief second, their eyes met across the chamber. What happened next shocked everyone in the room. Queen Vala's confident posture suddenly changed. Her large compound eyes widened, and her antennae began twitching rapidly. She took one step backward, then another. Her breathing became quick and shallow. The golden crown on her head started to slip as her entire body began to shake. "Your Majesty," called her chief advisor, an elderly Zephrosian named Dex. The Queen did not answer. Her shaking became more violent. She tried to speak but only strange sounds came from her throat. Her 6 legs could no longer support her weight. With a crash that echoed through the crystal chamber, Queen Vala collapsed to the floor. Chaos erupted immediately. The alien delegates jumped up from their seats, shouting in their various languages. The Zephrosian guards rushed toward their fallen queen while the human guards, including Tom, moved to secure the room and protect the visiting ambassadors. "Nobody move," shouted Captain Rex, the head of palace security. "This chamber is now under emergency lockdown." The royal doctors arrived within minutes. They were the finest medical experts in the Zephrosian Empire, with knowledge of anatomy and healing techniques gathered from hundreds of worlds. They surrounded the queen with their advanced scanning equipment, working quickly to determine what had caused her collapse. Tom watched from his position, but his mind was already working on the puzzle. He had seen the exact moment when the queen's condition changed. It was not gradual like a poison or disease would be. It was instant, triggered by something specific. Dr. Kane, the lead physician, ran his scanners over the queen's motionless body. "Vital signs are stable," he announced to the worried crowd. "Heart rate normal, brain activity normal, no signs of toxic substances in her system." "But why won't she wake up?" asked Ambassador Lyra from the Aquarian delegation. "Unknown," Dr. Kane replied. "All physical indicators suggest she should be conscious and alert. There is no medical explanation for this condition." The accusations began almost immediately. The Terran ambassador suggested that one of the other delegations had used an untraceable poison. The Aquarians demanded that everyone submit to detailed scans to check for concealed weapons. The atmosphere in the chamber grew tense and suspicious. Tom noticed that Ambassador Crix had not joined in the arguments. Instead, the tall alien stood silently near the back of the room, staring at the queen's still form with what looked like genuine pain in his dark eyes. "We must transfer her to the medical facility immediately," Dr. Kane announced. "Our most advanced equipment is needed to solve this mystery." As the medical team carefully moved Queen Vala onto a floating stretcher, Tom made his decision. While the other guards focused on maintaining security and the doctors concentrated on medical possibilities, he would investigate the one thing that everyone else seemed to have missed: the timing. Tom had excellent memory for details, a trait that made him valuable as a guard. He could replay the events in his mind like watching a recording. Queen Vala had been perfectly fine until the exact moment when Ambassador Crix stood up and their eyes met. The change in her condition was immediate and dramatic. Over the next several hours, the medical team ran every test known to Zephrosian science. They scanned for poisons, viruses, parasites, and radiation. They checked for neural interference, psychological manipulation, and even rare forms of alien hypnosis. Every test came back negative. Tom used this time to conduct his own quiet investigation. He reviewed the security recordings of the chamber, focusing on the moments before the queen's collapse. He studied the facial expressions and body language of every person present, using human skills that the aliens often found mysterious. The more he watched, the more convinced he became that Ambassador Crix held the key to solving this mystery. But it was not what Tom had initially expected. The ambassador was not hiding guilt or satisfaction at the queen's condition. Instead, he seemed to be in emotional pain. Tom decided to learn more about Crix's background. He accessed the diplomatic records using his security clearance and spent hours reading about the ambassador's history. What he found was interesting but incomplete. Crix had been born on Titan VII but had spent several years of his youth on Zephyros as part of a cultural exchange program. He had returned to his homeworld to pursue a career in mining and diplomacy. The record showed he was highly respected and had never been involved in any political scandals. But Tom noticed gaps in the timeline. There were several years during Crix's time on Zephyros where the records were vague about his activities. The official documents mentioned cultural studies and language training but provided no specific details. As Tom continued his research, he made an important discovery. The time period when Crix was on Zephyros corresponded exactly with Queen Vala's youth, before she had taken the throne. This could be a coincidence, but Tom's human instincts told him it was not. He decided to take a risk. Using his access as a guard, Tom visited the medical facility where Queen Vala lay unconscious. The room was filled with advanced monitoring equipment that beeped softly as it tracked her vital signs. Dr. Kane and his team had been working for hours but had made no progress in understanding her condition. "Any changes?" Tom asked the doctor on duty. "None," the young physician replied. "She remains completely unresponsive. We have never seen anything like this in Zephrosian medical history." Tom approached the Queen's bedside and studied her carefully. Her compound eyes were closed, and her breathing was steady. But something caught his attention that the medical team had not mentioned. Her antennae were moving. The movements were very subtle, almost impossible to notice unless someone was looking specifically for them. But they were definitely there, twitching in small, rhythmic patterns. Tom had worked with Zephrosians long enough to know that antennae movement often indicated subconscious mental activity. "Doctor," Tom said, "have you noticed her antennae?" The physician looked more closely. "Yes, there is some minor neural activity. But it is not enough to indicate consciousness." Tom thought about this as he left the medical facility. In humans, people in comas sometimes responded to familiar voices or emotional stimuli even when they appeared completely unconscious. Could something similar be happening with Queen Vala? He returned to his investigation with renewed focus. If the Queen's condition was somehow related to Ambassador Crix, then understanding their connection was crucial. Tom decided to take a more direct approach. He found Crix in the guest quarters assigned to the Titan 7 delegation. The ambassador was alone, sitting by a large window that looked out over the crystal spires of the Zephrosian capital city. His posture suggested deep sadness. "Ambassador Crix," Tom said, announcing his presence. The tall alien turned toward him. "Guard Tom, is it not? Have there been developments with Queen Vala's condition?" "That's what I want to discuss with you," Tom said carefully. "I've been investigating the circumstances surrounding her collapse." Crix's expression became guarded. "And what have you discovered?" "I've noticed that her condition began at the exact moment when you stood up and made eye contact with her. I've also learned that you spent several years on Zephyros during your youth, at the same time when the Queen was a young adult." For a long moment, Crix said nothing. His dark eyes showed a conflict between duty and emotion that Tom recognized from his experience with many different species. "You are very observant," Crix finally said. "But I fail to see how ancient history relates to the Queen's current medical emergency." Tom decided to be direct. "Ambassador, I believe you and Queen Vala have a personal history that goes beyond diplomatic relations. And I think that history is connected to her condition." Crix stood up and moved away from the window. His tall frame seemed to fold in on itself as he struggled with some internal decision. "Even if what you suggest were true," he said slowly, "how could personal matters from decades ago cause a medical crisis?" "That's what I'm trying to understand," Tom replied. "But I can't help the Queen unless I know the whole truth." The ambassador was quiet for several more minutes. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Vala and I were close once. Very close. But that was long ago, before she became queen, before I became an ambassador." "Some connections transcend time and politics," guard Tom. "Sometimes seeing someone from your past can affect you in ways that logic cannot explain." Tom felt the pieces of the puzzle starting to come together. But he needed more information to fully understand what was happening to Queen Vala. The next morning brought troubling news. The Queen's condition had not improved, and the diplomatic situation was becoming more complicated. The other ambassadors were demanding answers and threatening to leave if the mystery was not solved soon. The peace summit that was supposed to bring four worlds together was instead creating suspicion and mistrust. Tom knew that time was running out. He had to find a way to help Queen Vala, not just for her sake, but for the future of interplanetary relations. His investigation had given him important clues, but he still needed to understand exactly what was keeping the Queen unconscious. The answer, he was beginning to realize, lay not in medical science or political intrigue, but in something far more complex and powerful. Something that the logical minds of the Zephrosians might have difficulty accepting. As Tom prepared for what he hoped would be his breakthrough investigation, he could not have known that his next discovery would change not only Queen Vala's fate, but also the way different species understood each other throughout the galaxy. Tom spent the next day thinking about everything he had learned. The medical team continued their tests, but they found nothing wrong with Queen Vala's body. Her vital signs remained normal, yet she stayed unconscious. The other ambassadors were becoming more worried and angry with each passing hour. Ambassador Crix had admitted that he and the Queen shared a close relationship in the past. But Tom needed to understand exactly what kind of relationship it was and why seeing Crix again had caused such a dramatic reaction in Queen Vala. That evening, Tom made a decision that went against all protocol. He returned to the medical facility and requested private time with the unconscious Queen. The doctor on duty was surprised by this unusual request. "I am not sure this is appropriate," Dr. Kane said when Tom explained what he wanted to do. "The Queen requires complete rest and monitoring." "Doctor, your medical approach has not worked for 2 days," Tom said respectfully. "Perhaps it is time to try something different. On Earth, we sometimes talk to unconscious patients. Sometimes they can hear us even when they cannot respond." Dr. Kane looked puzzled. "But Queen Vala shows no brain activity that would suggest conscious awareness." "Her antennae are moving," Tom pointed out. "That indicates some level of mental activity, even if your machines cannot measure it." After much discussion, the medical team agreed to give Tom 30 minutes alone with the Queen. They would monitor everything from the next room and intervene if her condition changed in any way. Tom entered the quiet medical chamber and approached the Queen's bedside. She lay perfectly still except for the subtle movement of her antennae that had first caught his attention. The various machines continued their soft beeping, tracking every aspect of her physical condition. "Your Majesty," Tom said in a gentle voice, "I know you probably cannot hear me, but I want to talk to you about what happened in the chamber." He waited, watching her antennae carefully. The movement seemed to become slightly more active when he spoke. "I have been investigating your collapse," Tom continued. "I believe I understand what caused it, and it has nothing to do with poison or disease. I think you collapsed because you saw someone from your past. Someone very important to you." The Queen's antennae twitched more noticeably. Tom felt encouraged to continue. "Ambassador Crix is here for the Peace Summit. When you saw him after all these years, something happened inside your mind. Something your doctors cannot measure with their machines." Tom pulled a chair closer to the bedside and sat down. "In human medicine, we understand that the mind and body are connected in ways that science cannot always explain. Sometimes emotional shock can cause physical symptoms. Sometimes the heart can make the body sick." For the first time since her collapse, Queen Vala's breathing pattern changed slightly. It became deeper and more rhythmic. "I think you and Crix were more than just friends," Tom said carefully. "I think you cared for each other in a way that your people rarely talk about. And seeing him again brought back feelings that were too powerful for your mind to handle." Tom had studied Zephrosian culture during his time as a guard. He knew that their society valued logic and practical thinking above all else. Emotional attachments were considered distractions that could interfere with clear decision-making. This was especially true for members of the royal family, who were expected to make choices based on what was best for their people, not what they personally wanted. "Maybe you had to say goodbye to him when you became queen," Tom continued. "Maybe your duties to your people meant you could not follow your heart. That kind of sacrifice leaves scars that never fully heal." The Queen's antennae were now moving in more complex patterns. Tom recognized these movements from his time observing Zephrosian behavior. They indicated deep emotional processing. Crix is in pain too, Tom said. I have watched him since your collapse. He cares about what happens to you. Whatever separated you in the past, his feelings for you have not changed. Tom made his most important decision then. He stood up and moved toward the door. I am going to ask the doctors to let Crix visit you. I think hearing his voice might help you find your way back to consciousness. Your people need their queen, but more importantly, you need to face the feelings you have been hiding for so many years. When Tom explained his theory to Dr. Kane, the physician was skeptical. Guard Tom, you are suggesting that Queen Vala's condition is psychological rather than medical. Our species does not suffer from such ailments. With respect, doctor, maybe that is exactly the problem, Tom replied. Maybe your people have ignored the emotional side of health for so long that you do not know how to treat it when it becomes a medical issue. The debate continued for an hour. Other doctors joined the discussion, and opinions were divided. Some agreed with Tom that traditional medicine was not working and alternative approaches should be considered. Others insisted that only proven scientific methods should be used to treat their queen. Finally, Dr. Kane made a decision. We will allow Ambassador Crix to visit Queen Vala for 15 minutes. If her condition improves, we will continue this approach. If it worsens, we return immediately to standard medical protocols. Tom went to find Crix in the guest quarters. The ambassador was staring out the window again, lost in thought about the past. Ambassador, I need you to come with me to the medical facility, Tom said. Crix turned around quickly. Has something happened to Vala? Is her condition worse? Her condition is the same, but I think you can help her recover. I believe she collapsed because seeing you again triggered memories and emotions that her mind could not process. She needs to hear your voice. Crix stood up slowly. His tall frame seemed to shake slightly. You do not understand the complexity of our situation. There are reasons why Vala and I have not spoken in 20 years. I understand that your relationship ended because of political necessity, Tom said. But right now, politics does not matter. The queen is unconscious and nothing the doctors try is working. She needs something that medical science cannot provide. And what is that? She needs emotional healing. She needs to know that the feelings she has carried for 20 years do not have to remain hidden forever. Crix was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was filled with old sadness. Vala and I met during my cultural exchange program. We were both young and believed that love could overcome any obstacle. We spent 3 wonderful years together, planning a future that we thought nothing could destroy. Tom listened carefully as the ambassador continued his story. But when Vala's father died and she became queen, everything changed. The royal council made it clear that a queen of Zephyros could not form a permanent bond with an alien from another world. It would set a precedent that could complicate future diplomatic relationships. So you left, Tom said. I left because I loved her, Crix replied. I could see that staying would only cause her pain and make her duties as queen more difficult. I thought that if I disappeared from her life, she would be free to rule without the burden of our relationship. But she never forgot you. Apparently not. And I certainly never forgot her. Tom and Crix walked together toward the medical facility. As they approached Queen Vala's room, Crix became more nervous. What if seeing me makes her condition worse, he asked. What if not seeing you keeps her unconscious forever? Tom replied. Ambassador, you have spent 20 years apart. Maybe it is time to find out if love is stronger than duty. Dr. Kane met them at the entrance to the medical chamber. Ambassador Crix, Guard Tom has convinced us to try an unconventional approach to Queen Vala's treatment. We will monitor her vital signs continuously. If there are any negative changes, you must leave immediately. Crix nodded and entered the quiet room. When he saw Queen Vala lying motionless on the medical bed, his composure broke down completely. Tears formed in his dark eyes as he approached her bedside. Hello, Vala, he whispered in the ancient Zephrosian language that was used only between close friends and family. I have missed you more than words can express. The response was immediate and dramatic. Queen Vala's antennae began moving rapidly, and her breathing became deeper. The monitors showed increased brain activity for the first time since her collapse. Keep talking, Tom encouraged from his position near the door. Crix took the Queen's hand in his own. I have thought about you every day for 20 years. I have wondered if you were happy, if you found peace in your duties as Queen, if you ever thought about the time we shared together. Queen Vala's eyelids began to flutter. Her compound eyes opened slowly and focused on Crix's face. Crix, she whispered in a voice weak from her long unconsciousness. Are you real, or am I dreaming? I am real, he replied, squeezing her hand gently. And you are safe. Dr. Kane rushed into the room with his medical team. They quickly checked the Queen's vital signs and neurological responses. Everything appeared normal and healthy. Your Majesty, how do you feel? Dr. Kane asked. Queen Vala tried to sit up, still holding Crix's hand. I feel confused and embarrassed. What happened to me? Tom stepped forward. Your Majesty, you collapsed during the peace summit. You have been unconscious for 2 days. 2 days? The Queen looked shocked. But I remember seeing Crix and feeling overwhelmed by emotions I thought I had buried long ago. Then everything went dark. Dr. Kane ran more tests, but Queen Vala appeared to have recovered completely. Her collapse remained a medical mystery, but Tom's theory about emotional shock seemed to be correct. Over the next few hours, the Queen and Crix spoke privately about their past and their feelings. Tom learned later that their conversation was painful but healing. They had both carried guilt and regret for 20 years, wondering if they had made the right choice in separating. The peace summit resumed the following day. Queen Vala appeared stronger and more confident than before her collapse. The trade agreements were signed successfully, creating new partnerships between the 4 worlds. But the most significant change was in how the Zephrosian medical community approached health and healing. Dr. Kane began studying the connection between emotions and physical well-being, something that had been ignored in their society for generations. Guard Tom, Queen Vala said to him privately after the summit concluded, your understanding of the heart has taught us something important about ourselves. We have spent so long focusing on logic that we forgot emotions are also part of health. Your Majesty, every species in the galaxy has feelings, Tom replied. The difference is that humans have learned to accept emotions as a natural part of life instead of fighting against them. And what about Crix and myself? Do you think we made the right choice 20 years ago? Tom considered his answer carefully. I think you made the choice that seemed right at the time. But people and circumstances change. Maybe the question now is what choice is right for today. Queen Vala smiled, the first genuine smile Tom had seen from her since his arrival on Zephyros. You are wise for such a young human. Perhaps wisdom comes from understanding the heart as well as the mind. In the weeks that followed, Tom watched as Queen Vala and Ambassador Crix slowly rebuilt their relationship. They were both older and more experienced now, better able to balance personal happiness with professional responsibilities. Their renewed connection became a symbol of cooperation between Zephyros and Titan 7. Instead of creating diplomatic problems, their relationship actually strengthened the alliance between their worlds. Tom received recognition for his role in solving the mystery of the Queen's collapse. But more importantly, he was appointed to a new position created specifically for him, interspecies emotional counselor. His job was to help different alien species understand the psychological aspects of health and relationships. It was a role that no human had ever held before, and Tom took it seriously. He traveled between star systems, teaching medical professionals about the connection between emotions and physical health. He helped resolve diplomatic conflicts by identifying underlying emotional issues that pure logic could not address. The Aquarians learned that their high rates of depression were connected to isolation from their family pods. The Terrans discovered that their competitive nature was causing stress-related illnesses. Species after species began to understand that feelings were not weaknesses to be ignored, but important parts of overall health. Tom often thought about the day Queen Vala collapsed in the crystal chamber. At the time, it seemed like a medical crisis that threatened an important peace summit. But it turned out to be something much more significant, the beginning of a new understanding about the universal nature of emotions. The galaxy was a vast place filled with thousands of different species. Each had evolved differently, with unique bodies and minds and cultures. But Tom had learned that one thing connected them all: the capacity to feel love, loss, joy, and sadness. His human ability to recognize and understand these feelings had saved a queen's life and changed the course of interplanetary medicine. It showed that humanity's greatest contribution to the galaxy was not advanced technology or military strength, but emotional intelligence and empathy. Years later, when Tom looked back on his time as a royal guard, he realized that protecting people involved more than just physical security. Sometimes the most important threats came from within, from feelings that had been suppressed too long or hearts that had been broken by impossible choices. Queen Vala and Ambassador Crix eventually married in a ceremony that brought together representatives from hundreds of worlds. Their love story became legendary, proof that some connections transcend politics and time. But Tom knew the real lesson was simpler: emotions were not obstacles to overcome, but essential parts of what made life meaningful. The peace summit that had almost failed became the foundation for the most successful period of interplanetary cooperation in galactic history. And at the center of it all was a human guard who understood that sometimes the most important battles were fought not with weapons, but with compassion and wisdom about matters of the heart.